Hello. Today I'm very excited because I'm going to be talking about a fragrance by one of my favorite niche houses of all time, Amouage. If you remember, I already did an in-depth introduction to this house when I reviewed Fate for Women. You can click this link if you haven't watched that yet. Today's fragrance is none other than Epic Man. Epic is a spectacular name and really does create very high expectations. So stick around to hear if it delivers on that. So as the name suggests, Epic was inspired by the immensity and diversity that we associate with the history and legends of the Silk Road. The Silk Road was a vast network of trade routes that connected Europe to China, the East, and the Far East. And there was a constant stream of tradesmen from every culture moving highly prized consignments of silks, spices, and precious woods. It was pivotal in globalizing the world and was a melting pot of cultures, legends, treasures, and aesthetic sensibilities. These routes were safe passages for those who could afford to pay the taxes to use them, but many chose to use alternative routes where they were much more exposed to being ambushed by bandits. Later, when I describe this fragrance, you'll better understand the reference to the spectacular fusion of legends and aesthetic stylings. This composition involves many of the treasured materials that were traded along these routes, as well as capturing the vastness and variation of the landscapes that were encountered along the way. There are two versions of the original Epic by Amouage. There is the female marketed version called Epic Woman that looks like this, and then there is today's fragrance Epic Man that looks like this and is dressed in Amouage's signature bottle that is reserved for male marketed fragrances. The lid is a stylized representation of the handle of the ceremonial dagger of Oman called the Khanjar. The Epic Man bottle distinguishes itself with a deep green glass and an ivory-colored cap that has a rhinestone accent on the front. I personally only own this miniature that comes from a set of 6. And I will be reviewing these individually because they certainly deserve specific and individual attention. I suspect that Epic is my husband's favorite of the 6. I personally can't decide between Epic, Interlude, and Memoir of the 6. They are breathtaking examples of Arabian-style blending, which are usually richly complex and opulent beyond what Western fragrances usually offer. This is a woody, earthy, leathery oriental, and it opens with a soaring symphony of cool, spicy smokiness. You're immediately aware that you're dealing with a grand, complex composition that is going to deploy a massive story. The very first note I get is a peppery sweetness that is lifted with an airy green cardamom, and there is a bright woodiness that comes from nutmeg, and very soon you also get mace. Now mace is not what you think. It's not used in self-defense. It's the husk of the nutmeg that is dried and used as a spice in and of itself, and it's not as sharp and woody as nutmeg, although it's similar, but it has a much sweeter and leathery, spicy, nuanced vibe. I use it a lot in cooking, and I'm very happy to find it here. It's unusual to find mace in a fragrance, and here it lends a lot of exoticism. I feel like the nutmeg also has a very delicate soapiness to it, which makes the opening slightly barbershoppy. It's a very clean, bright opening, but you definitely get that spiciness that makes it complex and different. There is also a very distinct dose of myrtle, and that supports the freshness I get from the pepper and the cardamom. It's a very bracing, airy, almost evergreen feel Now, myrtle is not derived from the flower, it's derived from the twigs and the leaves and has a camphorous feel to it. And that's why you get that evergreen quality when mixed with pepper and cardamom and other green spiciness. About 10 minutes in, you get warmer facets that are starting to emerge. And it's led by a very subtle saffron note that is rich and smoothing. There is also cumin that is slowly starting to creep in and starting to mingle some exotic grit into the otherwise very clean composition. Now, if you are a person who is averse to cumin's sweaty, animalic character, then I would approach this fragrance tentatively, but that said, it never gets very animalic. It's raunchy and sexy, but it's not too dirty. Since the beginning, frankincense has been present. It's a smoky, sweet frankincense that is quite delicate in the opening, and it starts to become a little louder into the dry down, and it blends beautifully with that fresh green opening, and it gets warmer and richer as the fragrance dries down. Overall, the opening is rich and complex, but at the same time it is modern and energetic. In the heart, we have an overdose of a beautiful geranium that I absolutely love in compositions. It's similar to rose. It's got a rosiness to it, but it's much more rough and tumble, and it's got green facets, it's got earthiness, and it really does add to the landscape that the opening was depicting. Now there are richer notes that are starting to surface, and you have patchouli, a very earthy patchouli that is starting to surface slowly, and it's definitely taking this fragrance off-road. I'm starting to get a leathery castoreum note. Now, castoreum is a very rich, leathery, very virile note, and it is not for you if you like to smell freshly out the shower. It's not a clean smell by any means. It's the opposite. It's raunchy, it's earthy, it's very intimate smelling, and if you want to know more about it's quite a controversial note, and if you want to know more about it, you can click this link here where I go into detail about the note. Personally, I find it incredibly seductive. It's enveloping and hypnotizing. It's really very intimate. So about 1 hour into the dry down, you have a splendid medley of woods that starts to emerge, and that is a beautiful bouquet of contrasting characters in wood. You have oud, which is earthy and pungent and very mysterious, and really does make you want to delve in to explore where it's coming from. And it is balanced with a sweet, smooth sandalwood, which is very dreamy. And there is also a strong masculine cedarwood. So this woody accord is very multifaceted and fascinating, and it really does give the base of this fragrance enormous complexity and richness and intrigue. As time passes, the leatheriness and the earthiness become more and more bold and starts to take up more room in the composition. But they still hang on to that fresh, dynamic opening, and it's very contrasted, and at this stage it really reminds me of the image of a king's messenger racing on horseback across the country to deliver a message. You have that adrenaline and that rushing air and the sweat and the animalic facets and the dust. It's all intermingled and paints a very vivid picture. The fragrance has gone from soaring like an eagle to a much more grounded escapade. And you'd think with so many intense notes, this fragrance would become dark and brooding, but actually the opposite is true. It is bright, open, and very valiant feeling, despite all its complexity and depth. If this fragrance were a film, it would be set in a breathtaking landscape, and shot on 70mm. So although this is a male marketed fragrance, I find it quite unisex, and I like to sneak a little drop from my husband's bottle every so often. This is a fragrance that gives off a kind of confidence that comes with ineffable sex appeal. Its elegance is seemingly very outdoorsy, but make no mistake, like with all Amouage fragrances, this is extremely refined. This is for someone who is great-hearted and unafraid to pursue his convictions. He is equipped with a romantic heart, but also an astute mind, and he is physically engaged. This is for a prince who is precocious in both political and strategic matters, but who is also very astute in the field, navigating a variety of landscapes and cultures. If you have the personality to lead people into an adventure or pioneer projects, then this could be the scent for you. I find Epic Man to be pleasantly versatile, and it works well in both cool and warmer weathers. I'd say though that it's more of a smart casual wear, and I would reserve Interlude Man for your black tie events, but that is for another day. The performance on Epic Man is fantastic and leaves a very enticing trail for the first 6 hours or so. It then settles more closely to the skin, but is still detectable for up to 12 or more hours. The overall feel of this fragrance reminds me of a riveting experience I had a couple of years ago here in South Africa in a mountain range called the Drakensberg. I was in the mountains, and they are these broad, very tall mountains, and with very deep, large valleys, so you have incredible visibility, and it feels like you see to the end of the world. And we were there, and it was stormy, and the sky was darkening, and the handler was stood amongst us and told us he had a number of Cape vultures circling in the thermals in the valley, but none of us could see a thing. There wasn't a bird in sight. And he slowly made a gesture, a very subtle gesture with his hand, and slowly we started noticing specks appear on the horizon, very, very distant, and first on one side and then the other, and they started getting closer and closer, and we realized soon that there were dozens of vultures converging on us from all sides, and it really sent a lump in my throat. And they came closer and closer and eventually landed. It turns out that Cape vultures have incredible eyesight and see in sharp focus for kilometers. They had seen his gesture, and they had landed in amongst us and were standing there as tall as 6-year-old children. It was a riveting experience, and it really reminds me of today's fragrance in the sense that it's like a subliminal seeming flag that just gestures to the world in a subtle but very powerful way. And you have this convergence of intrigue that comes around you wearing this fragrance, and that is how I experience it. It's incredible. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you can, go and smell this fragrance for yourself and let me know what you think in the comment section. Also, let me know if you agree with my description. If you enjoy my style of fragrance reviews, then please subscribe so that we can grow a community of like-minded people, and you will also always be aware of new content coming out and sometimes giveaways. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.